Welcome to another episode of Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Before we get started on the episode, just wanted to take a moment just to plug myself. Make sure to check the podcast out. It is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and if there's any other medium or platform that you listen to that you want it up on, just let me know and I'll see if I can get it up on there. Follow me on Instagram, RTD underscore III. Also, I'm on Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. I try to post polls and some stuff on there, for y'all to interact with that I might use in the show going forward. So, try to do some interactive stuff on there as well. So, again, Instagram, RTD Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Follow me. Check out the podcast and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. So before we get started, before we get started, I'm not excited per se to do this topic, but I do think it is one of not genuine interest, but I think it is one that our society genuinely needs to discuss more. And I think that it's like something everybody knows, but no one talks about. I think people talk about, but not to enough degree. And to me, that is the I call it an epidemic, and that's what I'm gonna refer to it as during this episode. The porn epidemic, and I think it's had a profound impact, especially in since COVID. It's had a profound impact on our society. The kind of explosion of it. I mean, it's always been there, and porn has always been a large industry. Don't get me wrong, but it seemed to have become larger in a sense, or it seems to have more of a place in society than it has in the past, I should say. And so I just think we should talk about it because I think it has a lot of impacts on us that we don't. I mean, that I see some people refer to, but I don't think that we give enough credence or credit to. And so to start, I mean, I think to start this, you have to kind of state the obvious, right? That, like the concept of porn, or I guess selling sex in that sense, is an industry that is as old as time. I mean, they say that the oldest type of job in the world might be prostitution. So, like, that's understandable. And in a silo, like by itself on its own, porn isn't a bad thing. Like, it exists for a purpose of pleasure, and some people have various things that they get out of it, and it doesn't always have a completely negative connotation. I don't think it's made for a completely negative purpose. So I think we have to kind of give that point before we start with it. But with that being said, some people and I'm going to talk about it in the concept of people and both men and women, but I have to. It would be a disservice to not mention specifically how it has impacted men in a large way in recent years, and I think a lot of men have become addicted to it for various reasons, quite honestly. Um, and so when we talk about that particular concept of becoming addicted to it, well, why is that the case? Well, I mean, I think porn provides us an immediate gratification. Um, it provides an immediate fantasy in whatever way that you're looking for it. And it also provides a certain feeling of protection through anonymity. You're watching it. Whenever you're done with it, you can cut it off. It's not like dealing with people where there's an added concept of dealing with a person involved with it. And I think that's that's part of why and how. We'll talk about it more, but I think just to begin with, that's part of why and how this has become such an issue for some men, is because it's a way to kind of feel things without having to actually talk to people to feel things. Um, and I think this concept is bigger than just us losing kind of like our morality or our standards in terms of like this kind of explosion of kind of like the prevalence of porn in our society. Like it's bigger than just like from a morality standpoint. I'm not talking about it like from the concept of somebody in the 50s saying, "Oh, can you not believe that women are showing like their ankles on TV?" No, but I do think to a concept, when we see sex appeal, attraction becoming such a major part of everyday society, where, I mean, if you look at the internet, you see various people, women and men, selling themselves in whatever way. You see people in just everyday life trying to be more seen or noticed. And I think that kind of Instagram model, and I don't mean this in men or women type of thing, but that Instagram model type of thing kind of promotes that and that kind of sex appeal. You see people wear clothes that show themselves off in environments or audiences that probably don't call for it. Um, and I think that's bigger than just us losing our morality or standards. I think that's a cultural shift that we really have to talk about in terms of why this has become such a, why the concept of sex and attraction and everything has become such a hard point for us. Um, and I think, this epidemic in terms of porn, it combines our perversion. And I talk about humans in the general sense of human species. Perversion is natural for us. We're not too far akin from primates that play with themselves constantly. Like we're not, like, you know what I'm saying. Like perversion is not a unnatural thing or concept. And so, this concept of the porn epidemic combines that perversion with the ability of, kind of like that instantaneous gratification. And again, that it's no work or exception involved. Like it's what you want when you want it, and that's it. Um, and so when we talk about why this topic matters, and I've talked about that to a degree already, but just why this matters. Um, Porn has become, and I believe this is both for men and women, quite frankly, porn has become widely used as an alternative to actual intimacy, and I think men are more using it for that. Um, and I think at the same time, this has actually had a drastic impact, especially on men, had a drastic impact on how men view women and they view sex. And so let me kind of go a little bit more, I guess, into detail on that. Like, porn allowed a lot of people, I mean, in terms of its overuse, I don't want to say just using it, but the overuse or over reliance on it, it became an alternative to intimacy because of the fact that it allowed people to kind of have those feelings or those experiences in a fashion that they were comfortable with being themselves, just by themselves, and in a medium that they could control. And I'm going to speak from the concept a a guy that I've been both a guy that had women interested in him and both the guy that had no women interested in him. So I'm gonna speak from the concept of the guy that had no women interested in him for a minute. If you find it hard to talk to women or to attract women, then it's going to ultimately, I mean, by common sense, going to be hard to find yourself in situations of possible intimacy with them, right? And so I think a lot of people, or in a men, let me just stay with men in this room, instead of I don't want to say braving that because I don't want to make it sound like a bitch made thing or nothing like that. But instead of continually trying, or trying to improve your social skills, or trying to improve your game per se, or trying to improve your communication, or trying to be better at talking to women and understanding women, which will ultimately lead to those situations, or those intimate situations with them, people just cut off. Uh, I ain't got to deal with that. I just watch porn. Oh, I don't got to, oh, women are hard to talk to, or they like, and then it makes it easier to try to make it like a blaming thing, right? So it's like, oh well, women want X, Y, and Z, or they only appreciate X, Y, and Z, or they only like X, Y, and Z, and since that's not me, I just don't deal with it. And then I turn to porn because it provides me an immediate alternative for that. And my over reliance on it becomes that because I don't have to deal with trying to persuade someone, or I don't have to deal with, you know, other people's emotions, or trying to connect with somebody or trying to be intimate with somebody. It's just whatever I want when I want it. And then when I'm done, I don't have to try to deal with the concept of, oh, this person is still here, or, residual feelings or relationships. It's just, I X out and done. And so I think type of that type of immediate access provided that alternative that a lot of people, especially men, just became over reliant upon, or not even say became, are currently over reliant upon, young and old. And then to the point of it having a drastic impact on how men and women view sex. I think and I think this is just in all concepts of it. I think in terms of what people physically can do, or physically do, the type of sex people have, I think comes into play with that. The I don't want to. I don't. I'm not trying to get overly detailed in this particular part because it's not particularly relevant to the overall conversation. But I think like things like the amount of physicality, um, the concept of foreplay, romance, all of that. I think, and just the act of sex in general, and just how they go about it. I think men especially started to look at women more in a, I don't want to say materialistic way, but more in a item way or a less human way in the concept of sex and porn. And I think overly or over reliance on porn from a male perspective, like I'm thinking of like a guy that watches porn probably multiple times every day, multiple times a day, and all he see is essentially women being used like an object in that particular concept, and so that morphs his brain. It morphs his brain, even if he knows he's not a porn star or stuff, but if he's ever in that situation, the way he thinks is what he sees. And he doesn't see women as, he sees no other content that promotes women as a person or emotional being or a sexual being outside of literally just the physical concept of somebody having sex with them. And I think that impacts how a lot of men have viewed women during sex, and obviously for the negative, making them, like I said, just a lot more materialistic or a lot more type of itemized type of view, or making sex a dissociative type of act, where I think a lot of women, and I believe men too, need emotional intimacy or emotional closeness or some sort of closeness to sex, where it's not just, it seems like a business act or just an act solely based upon like attraction to a random stranger. And I think porn makes sex so impersonal, and it makes sex so transactional, and it makes sex so non it makes it so devoid of feeling that it becomes comfortable to a lot of men that would prefer it that way. And I don't think they prefer it that way because they like it that way. They just would prefer it that way because it's easier for them to deal with and understand. And it goes back to the point I made a little bit earlier, that kind of sex, intimacy, romance, all the stuff that kind of like this porn epidemic serves as a what's the word I'm looking for? Serves as a substitution for, an alternative for. Like, people used to have to develop social skills and communication for that, men and women. quite frank. I mean, and like we see this in TV shows and stuff. I mean, ask your parents and stuff all the time, but we see it in these things all the time. You know, in terms of the concept of like talking to the cute boy or girl in their class or at work, or you know that they see out in public, or the man or woman or whatever. Like, but the concept is that you used to have to be able, you know, if you wanted to have sex with somebody, you had to be able to it to get them to that point. Like, you know, it required work, and I think people are just less willing to do the work. Frankly, I mean, I think people are less willing to communicate with each other. They're less willing to talk to each other and like each other and try to build a relationship with one another, whether that's because of an emotional reluctance, whether that's because of they, you know, the shit that they hear online about men and women, or whether that's because of their own issues with sex or romance or whatever the case may be. We really have come to a point where people have, I mean, to the point I was saying, people have decided that it's romance is not worth the time. Not even romance, trying to pursue intimacy with somebody or trying to pursue any sort of relationship with somebody in order to achieve, I mean, you know, where sex will become part of it is just not worth the time. So if sex has not become a transactional act or an expectation based upon, you know, a transactional act, then there seems to be, you know, there seems to be a disconnect with that. Um, and it's proven to have, I mean, I think the epidemic, I mean, I think over reliance on porn, just quite frankly, is dangerous because it's proven to have negative impacts. It's proven to have a negative impact on, especially young men, on their mind, on people's mind, on how they, again, how they view each other, how they view sex, how they view romance, how they view people. Um, it has issues with how obviously people are able to sexually perform in terms of erectile dysfunction and things of that nature because of the fact that, or just being desensitized because of the fact that they're used to seeing something that is so much more extreme or so much more different than what reality actually is. Um, and I think, you know, when you have those sort of physical drawbacks from it, where it can make you anxious, it can make, you know, because it's not what you're used to seeing on the screen, or people, and just in the concept of people not being able just to physically communicate with each other anymore. Um, and all those negative impacts, I can understand why it's such a problem. And I don't understand why more people don't take that concept of it seriously, especially more men. Um, but again, this is an example of our embrace of kind of like the immediate gratification and our preference for disconnection. Like, the porn epidemic is essentially, and again, from, I'm speaking to this in the concept of from a young man, but uh, women are essentially going through a similar concept, if not the same thing in terms of that. If women are watching porn all the time, they're coming across these same issues. Um, or if they're finding the over reliance on porn, they're coming across the same issues, or they're doing it for the same reasons. Um, and I think, you know, that immediate gratification that, you know, I ain't got to talk to you, we ain't got to go through all this, ain't no back and forth, it's just bang, we straight to it. And, you know, that disconnection is ways it's coming, and people are trying to find other ways to bring it out, but porn has really been the the mainstream for it. And again, it's severely impacting men, both young and old. So I don't think, you know, when I talk about this, and I mean people as well, severely impacting people, both young and old. Again, I speak from the concept of men specifically, but if you know, if you hear on the internet, a lot like to talk about, I think about the porn problem, and I give them his credit on. I give the internet his credit on that. That it's one of, you know, I give young women on the internet his credit on that. They're one of the few that talk about this in the sense of, do y'all see what young men are going through? Not even do y'all see what young men are going through. Do you see what this is doing to young men? Young men that they have to interact with, you know? And and I think it can almost be a term of thinking, oh well, because this is a type of a technological problem, it's only deal with young people. But porn been around since God knows back way back when, and men have been over relying on it for a long time. It never spread out like this into a wide stream type of use before, and so it's impacting more men, and some that are older, some that are younger, but there is no variation between the two, quite frankly. And so I think that sometimes we have a thing to think, oh, this is a young person problem, but it's not. It's everybody. And I think the most important, I don't think it's the most important part, but a key thing about this is to realize that it's not that porn isn't is bad, but the porn industry has no incentive to stop producing content the way that they are. And they have no incentive to try to get, it's like tobacco companies and stuff like that. Like, is your product harmful to people? Yeah, it can be. And it's shown that, if people over rely on it, it can be extremely harmful. Are they going to do anything about that? No, because they have no incentive not to. That takes money out, literally would take money out of their pocket to do something about that. And so it's on us to self regulate. It's on us to show discipline. It's on us to find different outlets and mediums for that energy. And until we make those conscious decisions, we will remain in this place where we stay. I'm not sorry, where we become, but where we stay in kind of embedded to it. Um, and just to provide some more examples, like I know I think I talked about this in a episode before, but I encourage anybody to watch the movie Don John with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I forget it came out. It might have been over 10 years ago, but it speaks to this so elegantly. It speaks to the concept of young men, quite honestly, but it speaks to the porn thing so elegantly. And just to give a very quick synopsis, and again, if you listened to this and you heard it before, I'm sorry. There was a young man who had an addiction to porn. Like he would watch porn and masturbate all day. Not all day, but he would do it excessively. And the reason for that, he would always state that the reason for it was that he didn't need romance because of that. Like all the romance, everything came straight through the screen. He could disconnect when he wanted to. He didn't have to deal with talking to a woman afterwards or anything like, or before or afterwards or anything like that. He could just disconnect when he wanted to. And it wasn't until he met somebody that that showed him that made him feel things, that he kind of realized that was an issue. And to a degree, she made him realize that was an issue. But when intimacy really wasn't something that intimacy he was looking for in the sense of sexual gratification, but he had no interest in it outside of any sort of interpersonal concept because he was afraid to interact with the world. It wasn't a healthy thing. Like he was shut off from the world, and he was happy with the concept that I can have this and not have to interact with people. And just seeing it, and seeing him come to that realization was very opening. And to me, it changed how I looked at porn back then because I realized that, hey, what he was doing isn't crazy. That's not a crazy line of logic to use. And so this isn't like some crazy movie. Like, this is what a lot of people are doing. And so it really opened my eyes to that perspective. And I ask people, especially if you're a person that is struggling with, intimacy, with trying to, with being, not being intimate with people, but struggling with trying to want to be intimate with people or trying to connect with people, or you find yourself using things like porn as kind of a way to experience it in your own bubble. I, encourage you just to give that movie a glance because it takes a lot of look at love and intimacy and relationships and the concept of this very unique way, and it's not always clean and cookie cutter, but it can help you heal and move forward. And so yeah, I just encourage everybody to take a look. Um, and then again, I know I've talked about this a few times, but I can't say it enough. Like, men are using porn as an intentional crush for connection. If and so, I know I talk about like the incel community a lot because I find them such a fascinating example of this. But not just this, of a lot of things, but of a variety of things in one type of concept. But like with the incel community, for a point, these are men that feel like women do not want to have sex with them. So they call them, incel means involuntarily celibate. Like, I can't have sex because women don't want to have sex with me because they don't see value in me. And a lot of these men have shut out the concept of there's nothing, or that there's nothing that they can do. Like, it's not about me. It's that these women want things that I'm just not, or they have an unrealistic expectation of me. Like, it's nothing that they think that they can do to change their situation, or that they feel like they should do to change their situation. And they feel like maybe some feel like they're owed that. But porn is heavily used because it provides, to the point again, not to be a dead horse, but it provides that instant gratification, that disconnection. I don't need to try to know a woman. I don't have to deal with her emotions. I don't have to deal with her wanting something from me. I can see whatever sexually I want to see, whatever act I want to see, whatever act I like. I can see it, and it's not, and it's a woman doing it with no sort of hesitance or consultation or anything. They just whatever it provides this sexual fantasy that's filled with complete domination, complete compliance, and complete whatever you want it to be, and just not just real human interaction, whether that's sex, relationship, job, anything. It's real life is not like that in any way, shape, or form. So that crutch that men use it for connection is really based upon, in my opinion, that as a big part of it. You know, I can just be able to have my cake and eat it too, and I don't have to deal with you. Like, not to make it rhyme, but essentially. Um, and so, you know, the porn industry and just the kind of this movement is at an all time high, right? I mean, like, porn industry is booming. Like, they're making more money than ever before. So if anybody was to say, well, like, I don't really think porn is a problem. Yes, I mean, like, it's, and literally, like, it is a type of porn for anything. Like, porn is the most diverse, in my opinion, probably the most diverse industry in the world, because it's something that replicates almost everything that we have in society. Like, and that's always been something that we as human beings have embraced for whatever reason. Like, there's a porn parody of almost every movie, almost every TV show, almost any situation you can think of, any sort of fetish or fantasy. Like, they have a porn category dedicated to it. There is no concept, there's no field in the world, in my opinion, that is as fleshed out, and I don't mean that, excuse the pun, but that is as fleshed out as porn. Like, and I think that to say, and I think the over reliance and the explosion in use of it, not explosion in use, but it's kind of like dominance in our society is corresponding with that empire that kind of sits in our face, and kind of like the dark corner that we don't look at until we want to look at it. um and I'm trying to preface how I want to bring this next kind of example, because I do believe that everything is overly sexualized now. And so now I'm not talking about porn specifically, but I believe that everything that in our media, whether that's fashion, culture, or our TV, our radio, all of it, our music is old. It, it has been sexualized to a degree, or has been over sexualized to sell that. And so like, and it's the silliest things. Like every, you can be on social media right now, and every most ads, it can be an ad for Crest. It can be an ad for Arm& Hammer baking soda. It's going to have some pretty woman being or some attractive male essentially being the cover person for it, because they know that's what's going to make you watch. And if it's a woman, she's probably going to have a shirt with some sort of cleavage on, because they know that's going to make you watch. Does not matter if, like I said, it could be for Jello, it could be for chalk, it could be for tires, but that's what they're going to do. And like with our music, we see with our music has always been sexualized. And I don't want to say that the rise in like a lot of the female artists that we hear has come to more sexualization of it. I just think for some odd reason, and this might be a misogynistic thing or a cultural thing, I'm not sure, but for some odd reason, sex in the concept of saying it and being nasty and promoting it in music and everything, for some odd reason, it lingers differently when it comes from female artists compared to males. And not saying that in the sense that either one is right or wrong. I mean, I think both, if you say some overly, like the Yin Yang Twins song is an overly dirty song, just the same as something you would hear from Glorilla. But for some reason, I think, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's just me in the terms of listening to it now. But even if it's not, like, our music is still it's not overly sexualized, but our music is sexualized, and you're going to hear it all the time. And now I think it does come differently from women in the concept of, from a man is always like, take this. I want to take this from you, or I want you to do this in musically in a sexual concept. With women it's different, because I will do this, or I have this, or I'm going to do this. And it's, to me, it just sounds different, and not in a way of good or bad, but it just sounds, I mean, I think it rings differently, or its staying power is a little heavier, in my opinion. And then just to provide a beat it home type of example for this, Family Feud. I don't know when Family Feud got to the point to where it became Steve Harvey's mission is that every episode make somebody's patriarch or matriarch of their family say something dirty. Because that seems to be what they want every episode. Because I don't know who was like, we just asked 100 people, name a animal that you would compare with what you and your partner do in the bedroom. Like, what? And so but people like that. They laugh about it. Oh, grandma's talking about giving head. Ha, 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 ha. I didn't know she still did that. Like, it's such a weird thing. But a lot of TV shows are like that. Or a lot of media is like that. And so it's just a weird thing. And to piggyback off the media part a little bit more, let's talk about social media. I mean, that is essentially one of the biggest extensions of the porn epidemic. Like, because it promotes porn and sex constantly. Whether that be Instagram models, male or female. I'm assuming, I don't see male ones obviously, but I'm assuming they're there. But I mean, I don't see a majority of female ones. And it could be that, it could be the existence of OnlyFans. And OnlyFans, I don't want to like down talk OnlyFans or down talk people that use it, but I do think that has increased the comfort with transactional sex or transactional romance or transactional intimacy. I don't think it caused it. I don't think it's to blame, but I think it has increased the comfort for it. I mean, just because it's another tool for it, I think it definitely has done that. It's allowed people to pay for intimacy in the way that they want it, allow people to be able to provide intimacy to others in also a non-personal way. Kind of, I put out a video. If you want to watch it, go ahead. And so also Twitter, with its excess of pornography on there, um, the algorithm with your reels and stories. I promise you, I try my hardest to like. It's at times it seems like I have to fight the algorithm to try to take some of this shit off my timeline. Like, especially if you're scrolling on your phone at night, it seems like it's like a switch. Like it's just trying to promote is women talking about sex or they want sex or they're doing some sort of sexual, not sexual act, or they're simulating some sort of sexual act or something of the nature. And it gets to the point again where it's just like, what is all of this for? Who is sitting there looking at all of this all the time? But there are people, and like, it can just, to me, it just seems like an overload. And it's just like, yo, like, can y'all just chill out? Like, I was just trying to laugh and look at some stuff on my phone, and I ain't trying to see some girl trying to simulate giving head 15 times in a row. Like, but yeah, and also like the increase in kind of the exotic. I don't want to say exoticism, but the increase in exoticism and kinks and kind of like the freakiness, the Diddy trial type of stuff. I don't think the Diddy trial stuff came from porn. That comes from being rich and bored. That's also a big element. That's also a big promoter of perversion, being rich and bored. But that's a different concept for a different episode. Um, but I think this porn epidemic also did increase a lot of the kind of like explosion in kinks and exoticism that we see. Yeah, because I think people are just open to seeing things, and porn allows them to see stuff that they haven't seen before, and any sort of overt, crazy, weird sexual act they can see somebody doing. So, I want to try that as well. And then the last example I want to use, and I say this for last because I read about this, and I mean I know I've seen two movies I think that revolved around people. I know one was with the guy from Luke Cage, and the other was with the guy that played Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, and I forget the guy that played Luke Cage's name. Sorry, but where they had fell in love with AI. Essentially, the Joaquin Phoenix guy, I think he had fell in love with like the Siri type of application almost. While I mean, it was an episode of the Boondocks too. While the Luke Cage character, Luke Cage guy, he had fell in love with I think a AI robot. But these I bring this up because I read an article where the concept of an AI girlfriend is something that again a lot of guys on the internet, probably the incels, are embracing. And they embrace it, and I think it's an extension of the porn epidemic because the reason that they embrace it is because essentially it provides companionship with no pushback. It does whatever you want, like AI can't do whatever you want, obviously, because it can't do anything physical for you, but like it listens. Like these guys, and the guy posted like they can sit here and they can call it every name in the book. They can talk to it however they want. They can be as nice or as mean as they want, and it just takes. Yes, thank you, fine, no problem. And the more that it learns what you're like the role that you want it to play, it feeds into it. So it talks to them like a girlfriend, and it talks to them like and it pleases them with this kind of like king mentality, like I'm here to serve you, and then you talk to it like a peasant, and it just further perpetuates this kind of like weird power trip that these people are using it for. But that's an extension once again of the porn epidemic, where people don't want to connect with each other, they don't want to communicate with each other, they don't want to deal with each other, because that means dealing with people's feelings, dealing with people's emotions, dealing with people's expectations, dealing with people who are compromising, and they just want to do what they want to do, and they want to be done with you as soon as they're done. That's men and women. And so I think the I say AI girlfriend, but I'm pretty sure there are some women, some weird women out there doing as well. So the AI partners, that's an issue that is coming. I mean, that is emerging more and more, and I really think it's something that we need to be worried about in terms of just what it promotes and why people are so comfortable with it. And so the concerns that I have regarding this epidemic, and I've talked to about these to a degree already, is just the extreme desensitization, sorry, to intimacy, romance, sex, each other, like seeing porn. I mean, having an over reliance on porn can make you feel like sex is boring, or it's not what you see, so it's not what you think it is. It's not what you like, or like I don't understand why we have to talk. Why I need to make you, feel comfortable, or why we need to do foreplay. Why you need to be aroused first. Like why aren't we just jumping into this? I don't understand why you don't have a 12-inch penis. I don't understand why you can't have sex for an hour straight. I can't understand, why we can't do X, Y, and Z positions, or whatever the case may be. And I think, just it's extremely desensitized us to this whole thing, to where we don't even see each other. And a lot of, on the male side, don't see women as people, or as humans. We see them as sexual objects, and then even worse than that, we see them as sexual objects that are not as good as what we see online. Like it's just in a very weird space, and it goes to the thing of just saying it's created these unrealistic expectations for both sexes that we just talked about in terms of just what physically who people are, or what they're able to do, what sex can do, what it means to people, or the type of closeness that people need from it, what you get from it. All of these things, I think, are different in reality than they are in porn or online. And a lot of people are becoming so comfortable with the online version that it's just created that unrealistic expectation for them. And so the epidemic obviously is just an extension of society being less interpersonal. And it's always been that way. So like and so like when I say it's always been that way, like throughout, like since this is, and I don't know when it started. It might, again, I say it during COVID, but it could have been earlier. But it's always this concept of we as human beings, especially in today's modern times, want to try to find ways to be as away from each other as possible. We want to try to find ways to be as disconnected as possible from each other. If we don't have to interact with each other, we won't do it. And it's a very interesting concept, because how do we change that? And I think one of the concerns is just, will this lead to a rise in kind of fetishism? Will it lead to a rise in sexual violence? Will it lead to a rise in kind of like this in transactional sex, or a preference for transactional type of sexual interactions or intimacy interactions, or will it lead to more proclivity than we've seen in the past? Like I think it will. I mean, and I think it will in the case that people, as we go further down this road, people will less understand each other. They will less understand each other's wants and needs, and then it will be more misfiring and more hurting each other because of that. Because people will not have, and not even just misunderstanding, not having the want to understand or the want to do it either. And I think that's really the problem that we're at. And then just one concern I have in terms of the widespreadness of it all is, are we indoctrinating the next generation into this epidemic? because I I do I think kids pick up on things fast, and I mean, and this isn't just in sex. I mean, I think in general, but across the board, it seems like we are pushing for, we are putting our children in situations, or the next generation in situations to where they are definitely embracing more adult topics and themes at a younger age. And it doesn't always have to be, like I said, sex and or physicality, or it can be, just how the world works. It can be just language, and it can be a lot of different things. But we seem to be introducing, these concepts to them, or and just the concept of them being able to see it from through us, you know. Uh, and I think that's something that we have to watch out for. And so, in conclusion, like I said, porn isn't solely bad. Like on its own, it's not solely bad. It's only the over reliance on it. The over reliance on it and the use of it in substitution for actual physical connection or actual physical intimacy that has become problematic. And just to be clear, there is in no way, shape, form, or fashion that I ever believe people will stop using it. So, so the question then becomes, since our society has seemed to embrace this to a mainstream type of sense, to where, we see a lot more sex on TV and our TV shows, we see a lot more nudity in our TV shows, we see a lot more of just referral to sex in our shows and in our conversations and our media. Um, how do we kind of correct and regulate ourselves? Because this over promotion and over reliance has impacted us. We can say that it hasn't. We can, say that it hasn't. We can say, oh, it's just these people over here, or oh, it's just them, or oh, I don't, it's not me. If you do watch it, if you are find yourself having a problem with it, oh, you know, I don't have that issue. Like, but it has impacted us for the negative. We've seen just how many people don't seem to be able to communicate with each other, and just how messed up it seems that intimacy and relationships are for people now, especially ones that have an interest or overuse of porn. And so the question always becomes, how do we correct this? How do we regulate ourselves, and how do we get ourselves back on track? Because if we don't, nobody else will. They have absolutely no incentive to. So, with that being said, I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me. Um, Again, this is the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. Follow me on Instagram, RTDII, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Podcast is on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and Spotify Podcast. I appreciate you all so much for listening. See y'all at the next episode. I'm out.